Welcome back to CBS Saturday Morning. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, Dr. Anthony Fauci became the face behind the fight. The director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases is about to hang up his government lab coat, having served under 7 presidents over his near 5-decade career. All those years in public service have earned him some accolades. Last weekend, he was honored with the Lifetime Achievement Award at the 9th Annual Muhammad Ali Humanitarian Awards. Did you know him?
I didn't know Muhammad Ali, but the thing that just struck me is how courageous he was.
We met Dr. Anthony Fauci in Bethesda, Maryland, near his office at the National Institutes of Health, where we asked him, what's next? You're not retiring.
No, not even close.
What are you going to do?
Well, I don't know precisely what I'm going to do because I really can't negotiate a post-government job while I'm in government. My broad general theme, even though I don't know the venue in which it's going to happen, would be to continue to stay in the arena of science, medicine, and public health.
That by-the-book approach, he says, has served him well.
Would you be willing to submit to Congress and the public a financial disclosure?
Especially with his critics in Congress.
I don't understand why you're asking me that question. My financial disclosure is public knowledge.
Where would we find it?
All you have to do is ask for it.
His former boss, too.
Not a great doctor, but he's a hell of a promoter.
Though usually composed, he does occasionally bite back.
And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
Did you ever expect science would be so politicized?
No, there's always a bit of a politics involved, but we are living now in an era, I believe, where there is so much distortion of reality, conspiracy theory, and untruths.
But you worked for someone who many claim was really good at that.
I never, ever wanted to hurt anybody, including President Trump. But when you say that this drug works when it clearly doesn't, when you say that this is going to go away tomorrow like magic, when you know, as you see the outbreak evolving, that there's no chance it's going to just disappear. That led to the escalation of my becoming the boogeyman of the far right.
Despite the backlash, why didn't he leave?
It was clear that if we walked away from telling the truth in an environment of untruths, then there would be nobody there telling the truth. And this is Dr. Kazmekia Corbett.
He has a new boss now.
Thank you, Mr. President.
But he says the damage is done, evidenced by the refusal in Congress earlier this year to provide more COVID funding. Even as the death toll slows, it continues to rise, now above 1 million across the nation.
When you're dealing with an outbreak involving the country and the world, you generally think of the country as your patient. And when things get tough, you don't walk away from it.
For many, Fauci was the trusted figure above all to guide the ever-shifting challenges of COVID-19.
Everything else is noise. The adulation, though it's kind of nice, haha, the hate and the people who want to kill me is not real. It's unrealistic. Focus on what you're doing. You just concentrate on what your job is.
He has served under 7 presidents and under both parties through many crises, from Ebola all the way back to the one that started with President Ronald Reagan.
The causative retrovirus of AIDS is the human immunodeficiency virus.
Have we seen anything like AIDS before?
Well, AIDS brought into people's consciousness something that is been repeated a few times, a brand new disease that you have no prior experience with and was killing almost everybody that got infected. That was a major, major wake-up call.
Fight back! Fight AIDS!
He was criticized back then, too, for moving too slowly as the disease ravaged the gay community.
Here's the difference in the contrast and comparison between then and now. And I think people sometimes misinterpret, because back then the AIDS activists were trying to call to the attention of the authorities that we were approaching AIDS like any other disease in a very highly regulated, deliberative way. And if it took you 7 years to develop a drug, or who could or could not get into a clinical trial. So when the AIDS activists decided they needed to get the attention of these authorities, they decided the easiest way to do that was to just attack me. The beauty of it in some respects is that they were absolutely correct.
Which expedited the scientific and regulatory process.
That had never been happened before ever in medicine.
And ultimately impacted COVID-19 vaccine development.
We made major investments in science for decades prior to COVID. And within 11 months, have a vaccine that went through massive clinical trials. That is beyond unprecedented. We will never be able to prevent the emergence of a new infection. What you can do is prevent that emergence from becoming a pandemic.
He's led the NIH about as long as he's been married to Dr. Christine Grady, a world-renowned bioethicist and nurse. He says he couldn't have done any of it without.
She's just solid. She was working 18 hours a day by working, raising 3 children, getting a PhD, and doing a job that's an important job.
No complaints.
Never complain. Never complain.
Did I hear a crack in your voice?
Yeah,
You still get giddy about your wife.
I do. Yeah,
That's really sweet.
it's the truth.
After a 54-year career, America's top doc is in reflection. When you look back on your life, what do you want people to take from it, to remember you by?
Judging my accomplishments is for somebody else to do, but what I would like people in a broad sense to know is that I gave it everything I had, and I didn't leave anything on the field. And something I learned, he really is, he still sees patients, but he's a patient's doctor. He believes in listening to his patients, and he had quite a reputation on the hospital floor as being the guy. You don't mess with his patients. You make sure you do everything by the book with them. He was really spectacular when it came to talking about family and how much he owed to his wife. And so it's really interesting to see the whole man.
Yeah, it's a different perspective.
Didn't get home with him, but
talking about his wife there.
Yeah.
You don't see that side of him.
You don't.
And you brought it out.
Yeah, well, he has quite the smile too,
Yeah.
which you don't see a whole lot of.